Ladies and gentlemen, let us consider for a moment the unseen battle that rages beneath the surface of every interaction, every conflict, and every wound inflicted by word or deed. There is a peculiar tragedy in the human heart. Our tendency to argue not with the person before us, but with the shadows that grip them. When we find ourselves in contention, we must pause and ask, whom do we truly oppose? Is it the individual, a soul like ours made in the image of the Creator, or something darker? For you see, it is a clever trick of the adversary to hide behind the frailties of our neighbors, to whisper poison into their hearts, while convincing us that they are the source of the venom. Behind the horizon, for example, it seems impossible that the people opposed were the source of the venom. To argue with the darkness in a man as though it were the man himself is to wrestle with smoke. The more we strike, the more the haze entangles us. The more we rail against it, the deeper it seeps into our hearts, sowing bitterness and despair. There is a truth we must reckon with. People are not our enemies. They may wound us, they may speak with sharp tongues or act in selfish ways, but these are symptoms of a deeper sickness. A sickness that we share. The same tempters who whisper to them whisper to us, urging us to forget that they too are prisoners of war in this unseen struggle. So what then is to be done? Shall we sit silent, allowing evil to go unchallenged? By no means. But let us remember this. The goal is not to defeat our fellow man, but to liberate him. The weapons of this war are not anger or argument, but patience, kindness, and truth spoken in love. To engage in rage or scorn is to fight on the enemy's terms, and the enemy thrives on chaos and pride. If we must confront, let it be with a heart that seeks to heal, not harm. If we must speak, let it be with words that point to the light, not with accusations that deepen the darkness. And above all, let us pray. Not for victory over our neighbor, but for his deliverance and for our own. Do not argue with the demons in others, my friends, for they are not your audience. Speak instead to the soul that lies captive, the image of God that still flickers beneath the shadow. Love is the weapon they cannot withstand, and grace is the fortress they cannot breach. La Difre. So let us leave behind the futile battles of pride and wrath. Let us fight the true fight, with courage, humility, and a steadfast hope that the light will overcome the darkness, not just in them, but in us as well. In every conflict there lies a deeper reality, often hidden beneath the surface of our perceptions. When we clash with another person, through words, actions, or misunderstandings, it is easy to see them as the sole cause of our frustration or pain. Their words sting, their actions offend, and we react as if they are entirely responsible for the discord. Yet, if we pause and look more closely, we may realize that the true enemy is not the individual standing before us, but something far more insidious. Human beings are complex creatures, caught in a constant struggle between light and shadow. Within each of us lies the capacity for great good, as well as the vulnerability to darkness. This darkness does not originate from our essence, but creeps in through our fears, insecurities, and wounds. It is the whisper of pride, the tug of jealousy, or the subtle nudge toward resentment. These influences are not unique to any one person. They are universal, affecting every heart to varying degrees. When we encounter someone acting out of this darkness, it is tempting to direct all our anger and frustration toward them. We see their sharp words or unkind behavior and think, this is who they are. But such a conclusion overlooks a critical truth. They too are under siege. The real enemy is not the person, but the forces that have taken root in their heart, forces that, in quieter moments, may torment them as much as they frustrate us. These forces thrive on division, on turning us against one another. They delight in our quickness to judge and our slowness to forgive. By convincing us that our neighbor is the problem, they divert our attention from the real issue. This strategy ensures that we remain trapped in cycles of conflict, unable to see beyond the immediate hurt. The person before us becomes a scapegoat, bearing the weight of our own frustrations and the darkness they may not even fully understand within themselves. To recognize the true enemy is to step back from this narrow perspective and see the bigger picture. It is to understand that the individual who hurt us is not our adversary, but a fellow traveler, struggling as we are against unseen forces. This does not excuse their actions, but it does change our response. Instead of meeting hostility with hostility, we can respond with compassion. Instead of escalating the conflict, we can work to break the cycle. This recognition requires humility. It demands that we acknowledge our own susceptibility to the same darkness. For how often have we spoken harshly in moments of weakness? How many times have we allowed fear or pride to dictate our actions? When we see ourselves in the struggles of others, we begin to realize that the battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the unseen forces that work to distort and destroy. By shifting our focus in this way, we open the door to true reconciliation. We cease to fight against people and begin to fight for them, seeking to bring light where darkness has taken hold. When we engage in conflict with someone, it is natural to believe that we are addressing the heart of the issue, the person standing before us. Their words, actions, or attitudes seem to demand confrontation, but too often we fail to realize that we are not wrestling with the person themselves, but with the shadows that have taken hold of them. These shadows, fear, pride, anger, and insecurity, are not the essence of the person, but distortions of their true self. To argue with these shadows is to fight a battle we can never truly win. Shadows, by their nature, are intangible. They twist and shift, evading our grasp. When we try to engage with them, they lead us into frustration and futility. Consider the moments when we are drawn into heated arguments. We may believe we are contending with someone's beliefs, choices, or intentions, but in truth, we are often sparring with the pain or fear that drives those actions. The person may not even be fully aware of these forces, and our attempts to win the arguments only deepen their defensiveness, solidifying the shadow's hold on them. This is the trap of arguing with shadows. It convinces us that the louder or sharper our words, the closer we come to resolution. But in reality, every harsh word strengthens the walls of misunderstanding. Shadows thrive on chaos and division. They feed on the anger we project and reflect it back, creating an endless cycle of conflict. Each exchange becomes less about truth or reconciliation and more about pride, self-righteousness, or the need to be right. To escape this trap, we must change our perspective. Instead of seeing others as enemies to be defeated, we must recognize them as souls burdened by shadows, just as we are. Their anger may be a mask for fear. Their hostility may be a shield against past wounds. When we confront them as though the shadow is all there is, we fail to see the humanity behind it. We reduce them to their worst moments and ignore the complexity of their inner struggles. Breaking this cycle begins with humility and compassion. When someone lashes out, instead of reacting with equal force, we can pause and ask ourselves, what might they be wrestling with? What pain or insecurity could be fueling this behavior? This shift in thinking doesn't excuse harmful actions, but helps us respond in a way that addresses the root cause rather than the surface symptoms. Furthermore, we must examine the shadows within ourselves. How often do we argue not to seek understanding but to defend our pride? How often do our own insecurities turn conversations into battlegrounds? Recognizing this helps us approach others with a gentler spirit, knowing that we, too, are susceptible to the same forces. In the end, true resolution comes not from defeating the person, but from dispelling the shadow. This requires patience, grace, and a willingness to listen beyond the surface. When we refuse to argue with shadows, and instead seek the light within each person, we pave the way for understanding, healing, and reconciliation. Beneath the surface of every human interaction lies a profound truth. We are all engaged in a shared struggle. Though our experiences, choices, and outward appearances may differ, the inner battles we face are remarkably similar. This commonality is often obscured by pride, judgment, or misunderstanding, but if we pause to reflect, we will see that the burdens carried by others are not so different from our own. This recognition has the power to transform our relationships and our approach to conflict. Every human being carries within them a duality, the capacity for great good and the vulnerability to darkness. We are shaped by our pasts, molded by our fears, and influenced by unseen forces that tug at our hearts. In moments of weakness, we may give in to anger, selfishness, or despair. In moments of strength, we rise to acts of courage, love, and generosity. These opposing forces exist in every life, creating a tension that is universal. When we see someone faltering, acting in anger, pride, or selfishness, it is easy to judge them harshly. We may label them as unkind, unreasonable, or even beyond hope. But to do so is to forget our own moments of failure. How often have we spoken words we later regret, or made choices we wish we could undo? How many times have we allowed fear, insecurity, or bitterness to guide our actions? These moments do not define us entirely, nor do they define anyone else. They are part of the shared human struggle, a struggle against the shadows that distort our true selves. Recognizing this shared struggle fosters empathy. Instead of viewing others as adversaries, we begin to see them as fellow travelers on a difficult path. Their flaws and failings become less a cause for condemnation and more a reminder of our own fragility. This perspective shifts the way we approach conflict. Rather than seeking to dominate or humiliate, we can aim to understand, support, and guide. This shared struggle also reveals the importance of humility. When we acknowledge that we too are prone to the same weaknesses we observe in others, we are less likely to respond with arrogance or self-righteousness. Instead, we approach others with a spirit of gentleness, knowing that any victory over our own shadows is not a reason for pride, but a testament to grace. At the heart of this struggle is a deeper longing, a yearning for meaning, connection, and redemption. Each person's journey is marked by wounds and scars, yet it is also marked by the potential for healing and growth. When we remember this, we can move beyond superficial judgments and extend compassion, even to those who seem most difficult to love. End quote. Ultimately, the shared human struggle binds us together. It reminds us that, despite our differences, we are not so different after all. In recognizing this, we find the strength to forgive, the courage to reconcile, and the wisdom to build bridges where walls once stood. This shared journey, though fraught with challenges, offers an opportunity to grow together in understanding and love. When faced with conflict or disagreement, the instinctive response is often to aim for victory. We seek to prove ourselves right, to dismantle the opposing argument, or to assert control over the situation. Yet, this pursuit of triumph over others often leads to greater division, resentment, and misunderstanding. What if, instead of striving for defeat, we sought liberation, not only for ourselves, but for the other person as well? This shift in perspective transforms conflict into an opportunity for mutual growth and understanding, rather than a battlefield of egos. The desire to win in conflict is deeply rooted in human nature. It stems from pride, a sense of justice, and a longing for validation. We see the other person as an obstacle, an adversary to be overcome. But when we focus solely on defeating them, we risk losing sight of their humanity. We reduce them to their flaws or mistakes, forgetting that they are, like us, shaped by their experiences, struggles, and wounds. In doing so, we inadvertently strengthen the very forces, anger, bitterness, and misunderstanding, that perpetuate the conflict. Liberation, on the other hand, shifts the focus from domination to restoration. It recognizes that the true goal of any conflict should not be the humiliation or suppression of the other person, but their freedom from whatever shadow or struggle has ensnared them. This perspective acknowledges that their hurtful words or actions may arise from pain, fear, or ignorance, rather than malice. By seeking liberation, we aim to address the root cause of the issue, rather than merely silencing its symptoms. This approach requires humility and self-awareness. It begins with the recognition that we too are not immune to the shadows we see in others. Our anger may mask insecurity. Our righteousness may stem from unresolved wounds. By acknowledging our own need for growth, we can approach others with greater empathy and patience. Instead of viewing them as adversaries, we see them as fellow travelers, struggling with the same forces that challenge us. Liberation also demands a willingness to let go of our pride. In seeking to understand the other person, we may discover that we are not entirely in the right. We may find areas where we too need correction or forgiveness. This mutual vulnerability creates space for reconciliation and healing, breaking the cycle of conflict that so often traps us. To pursue liberation over defeat is not to excuse harmful behavior or to shy away from addressing injustice. Rather, it is to confront these issues with a spirit of love and a desire for redemption. It means speaking truth with kindness, challenging wrongs with the intent to restore, not destroy. It means seeking solutions that honor the dignity of all involved, rather than deepening divisions. In the end, liberation over defeat reflects a deeper truth. The goal of life is not to conquer others, but to grow together toward wholeness. By choosing this path, we not only free others from the shadows that bind them, but also free ourselves from the chains of pride, anger, and fear. In doing so, we create the possibility of true peace and understanding. Spiritual warfare is a reality often overlooked in the busyness of daily life, yet it underpins much of what we experience in our relationships, emotions, and inner struggles. Unlike physical battles fought with swords and shields, spiritual warfare is waged in the unseen realms of the heart, mind, and soul. It is a conflict not against flesh and blood, but against forces that seek to distort truth, sow discord, and pull humanity away from its divine purpose. Recognizing this hidden struggle allows us to navigate life with greater wisdom, humility, and resilience. At its core, spiritual warfare is a battle for allegiance. Forces of good and evil contend for our thoughts, desires, and actions, often in ways that are subtle yet profound. These influences do not manifest as dramatic clashes, but as whispers in the quiet moments. A temptation to choose selfishness over generosity, resentment over forgiveness, despair over hope. The enemy's strategies are cunning, designed to exploit our vulnerabilities and steer us toward division, pride, and fear. One of the most effective tactics in spiritual warfare is deception. The adversary seeks to distort our perceptions of ourselves, others, and even God. We may be tempted to see our worth as tied to accomplishments, our neighbor as an adversary, or God as distant and disinterested. These lies take root in our minds and shape our behavior, leading us away from truth and into isolation or conflict. Spiritual warfare also thrives on division. It seeks to turn people against one another, emphasizing differences and magnifying grievances. This is evident in personal conflicts, family breakdowns, and even societal discord. The goal is not merely to cause temporary strife, but to erode trust, compassion, and unity, leaving individuals fragmented and communities fractured. Recognizing spiritual warfare requires discernment. It calls us to look beyond the surface of situations and see the deeper dynamics at play. When someone speaks harshly or acts unjustly, it is easy to react with anger or defensiveness, but if we recognize that their behavior may be influenced by pain, fear, or spiritual struggle, we can respond with greater understanding. This does not mean excusing wrongdoing, but addressing it with a heart oriented toward restoration rather than retaliation. The weapons of spiritual warfare are not physical but spiritual. They include truth, love, prayer, and faith. Truth dispels deception, grounding us in reality and clarity. Love counters hatred and heals division, allowing us to see others as God sees them. Prayer connects us to the source of strength and guidance, reminding us that we are not alone in this battle. Faith provides the foundation to stand firm, even when the struggle feels overwhelming. Ultimately, spiritual warfare is not about triumphing over others, but overcoming the darkness within ourselves and the world around us. It is a battle for freedom, freedom from fear, bitterness, and falsehood, and freedom to live as we were created to be. Seen from a higher perch, this battle represents the restoration of the heart, of the deep security of humanity. By engaging in this struggle with humility and reliance on divine grace, we can become instruments of light and peace in a world too often overshadowed by darkness. Prayer for deliverance is an acknowledgement of our need for help beyond ourselves. It is a cry from the heart, seeking freedom from the burdens that weigh us down and the forces that entangle our souls. This act is not just about asking for relief from struggles. It is a declaration of trust in a higher power, a willingness to admit our limitations, and a desire to see the chains of darkness broken in both ourselves and others. At its essence, deliverance is about liberation, freedom from the fears, habits, and influences that keep us bound. These forces can take many forms: anger, bitterness, addiction, pride, or despair. They cling to us, sometimes subtly and other times with crushing weight, whispering lies that keep us from living fully and freely. To pray for deliverance is to name these chains and bring them into the light, where they can no longer wield silent control over our lives. This type of prayer requires humility. It begins with the recognition that we cannot free ourselves by sheer effort or willpower. The human tendency is to fight our battles alone, to resist admitting vulnerability. But deliverance comes when we set aside pride and open our hearts to divine intervention. It is a posture of surrender, acknowledging that true freedom cannot be achieved apart from the grace and strength of God. Praying for deliverance also shifts the focus from the external to the internal. When we face conflict or pain, our instinct is often to blame circumstances or others. Yet deliverance begins within. It is not merely about asking for others to change or for situations to improve, but for our own hearts to be transformed. We pray for the strength to forgive, the courage to let go of anger, and the clarity to see truth in the midst of confusion. At the same time, prayer for deliverance is an act of intercession for others. It is easy to view those who hurt us as enemies, as obstacles to our peace. But through prayer we begin to see them differently, not as adversaries, but as fellow souls in need of healing. Their actions may be driven by wounds or struggles we cannot see, and our prayers for their deliverance are as much about freeing them as they are about freeing ourselves from resentment. Deliverance is not always instantaneous. Sometimes it is a journey requiring perseverance and faith. The act of praying itself becomes a process of refinement, teaching us patience, dependence, and trust. It reminds us that freedom is not merely the absence of struggle, but the presence of peace, even in the midst of it. When we pray for deliverance, we invite a power greater than ourselves to work in our lives and the lives of others. We declare that darkness does not have the final word, and that light is always stronger. This prayer is not just an escape from difficulty, but an embrace of hope, a step toward healing, and a commitment to live in the freedom for which we were created. Love stands as the most profound and transformative force in the universe. It is more than a fleeting emotion or a simple act of kindness. It is a deliberate, unwavering choice to seek the good of another, even in the face of adversity. When viewed in the context of conflict, division, and strife, love becomes the ultimate weapon, not to harm or destroy, but to heal, restore, and conquer the darkness that divides and wounds us. Unlike anger or retaliation, which escalate tensions and deepen divides, love disarms. It refuses to meet hostility with hostility, choosing instead to respond with patience, understanding, and compassion. This is not a sign of weakness, but of immense strength, for it takes courage and self-control to resist the urge to strike back when provoked. Love's power lies in its ability to transcend the immediate emotions of a situation, addressing not just the symptoms of conflict, but its root causes. To wield love as a weapon is to fight for connection over division. When someone lashes out, it is often a sign of pain, fear, or insecurity. Responding with love creates an opportunity for healing. It says, "I see you, not just your anger or your flaws, but the person beneath them." This recognition can soften even the hardest hearts, breaking down walls that pride and anger have built. Love has a way of reaching places that arguments or demands cannot, inviting transformation rather than forcing compliance. The word love is also a weapon against the internal battles we face. Pride, bitterness, and fear are powerful forces, but they cannot stand against love. Choosing to love ourselves and others means rejecting the lies that tell us we are unworthy, unlovable, or isolated. It means embracing the truth that each person has inherent value, regardless of their actions or circumstances. This perspective frees us from the cycles of resentment and judgment that trap so many, and opens the door to forgiveness and reconciliation. Importantly, love is not passive. It does not ignore wrongdoing or shy away from addressing injustice. Instead, it confronts these challenges with grace and truth, seeking not to humiliate or defeat, but to bring about redemption and restoration. Love does not condone harm, but seeks to transform it, offering a path forward that honors both justice and mercy. The power of love lies in its resilience. It does not depend on reciprocity. It continues to act even when met with rejection or scorn. Love is patient and enduring, able to withstand the weight of misunderstanding and the sting of betrayal. Its quiet persistence can outlast hatred, proving over time that light is stronger than darkness. Ultimately, love as the ultimate weapon reflects a deeper reality, that true strength lies not in overpowering others, but in lifting them up. It is a force that unites rather than divides, heals rather than wounds, and builds bridges where there were once walls. Footnote. Note the lines on page 360. In a world that often glorifies power and dominance, choosing love is a revolutionary act, one that holds the power to transform individuals, relationships, and entire communities. In the chaos of daily life, it is easy to become consumed by the battles immediately in front of us. We argue with co-workers over misunderstandings, clash with loved ones over differing opinions, and harbor resentment towards strangers whose actions offend us. Yet so often these conflicts are distractions from the true fight, the deeper, unseen struggle that shapes our lives and relationships. Recognizing where the real battle lies can transform our perspective, shifting our focus from superficial skirmishes to meaningful action. The true fight is not against other people. Though their words or actions may hurt us, they are not the ultimate enemy. People, like ourselves, are complex beings, shaped by their experiences, emotions, and struggles. Their mistakes, shortcomings, or even hostility often stem from pain or fear rather than malice. When we focus solely on opposing them, we risk missing the larger reality. The forces that distort their behavior, and ours, are the real adversaries. These forces manifest as pride, anger, insecurity, and fear. They lurk in the background, influencing thoughts and decisions in ways that create division and conflict. When someone speaks harshly to us, it is tempting to react in kind, feeding the cycle of anger. But in doing so, we allow these unseen forces to tighten their grip, not only on them, but on us as well. By recognizing the true fight, we can resist the temptation to meet hostility with hostility and instead respond with wisdom and grace. To remain brave is not to avoid the hostility. To remain brave is to be. The true fight also calls us to look inward. It is easy to focus on the flaws and failings of others, but spiritual maturity requires us to examine our own hearts. How often do we allow pride to cloud our judgment or fear to hold us back from doing what is right? How many times have we let bitterness or impatience dictate our actions? The fight within is perhaps the most challenging, yet it is the most essential, for it shapes how we engage with the world around us. Focusing on the true fight also brings clarity to our priorities. It reminds us that life is not about winning arguments or proving ourselves superior. Instead, it is about building relationships, seeking truth, and fostering peace. When we shift our focus from temporary victories to lasting growth, we begin to see challenges not as obstacles to overcome, but as opportunities to practice patience, forgiveness, and love. Life is short. We will die once. What matters is pursuing the truth when so many other things seem. This perspective requires strength and humility. It means choosing to let go of grudges, even when we feel justified. It means speaking truth with kindness, even when it would be easier to remain silent or harsh. It means acknowledging our own weaknesses while striving to bring light into situations dominated by darkness. Ultimately, focusing on the true fight frees us from the distractions of superficial conflict. It allows us to engage in the deeper work of healing, understanding, and reconciliation. By keeping our eyes on what truly matters, we can rise above the noise and become agents of peace in a world too often consumed by division. Footnote: Motivation.